Chapter 11. Hook's Ghost. Barry bolted down the corridor. His heart felt like it might jump out of his chest. He could still hear the threatening voice booming out of the water at him. "Scurvy brat!" For the first time, he knew what he'd heard. He was wide awake this time. It wasn't just a dream. It wasn't his overactive imagination either. There was no mistaking that voice. "It's Captain Hook. He's after me," Barry thought wildly. But there was no way that the pirate was still alive. His pirate ship was in a museum, which could mean only one thing. Captain Hook's ghost must be haunting him, and had been ever since he stole the hook from his ship. That would explain all the weird things that had been happening to him since that day. He knew, on the one hand, that ghosts didn't exist. But on the other hand, he knew that the hook had magical powers. It had granted his wish to never grow up, hadn't it? So wasn't it possible that Captain Hook's ghost was real too? It sure felt real. And it was clearly furious at Barry for stealing his hook. "You're not the first little boy to take something from me that doesn't belong to you, but you will the last." The words echoed through his head again, making Barry's heart almost explode with fear. He cut through the museum, running as fast as he could to get away from the ocean exhibit. Down the dark and shadowy hall, he kept expecting Captain Hook to leap out of the darkness and attack him. Every shadow looked like a threat. Finally, he burst back into the main exhibition hall. Here it was brightly lit, and there were kids everywhere. He found his mother glued to her phone, along with the other parents. They all looked tired and vaguely annoyed by their offspring running all around the museum. "Mom, he's here!" Barry panted in a panicked voice. Now that he knew Hook's ghost was really haunting him, he had to get help. "We're in real danger. We have to go." "Who's here, sweetie?" Mom said, looking up from her screen. She had a glazed-over look in her eyes. "What are you talking about? Slow down and speak clearly." "Captain Hook." "His ghost?" "He's after me," Barry started, but the words dried up in his throat the second he said them. He realized how crazy he sounded. A second ago, he didn't believe in ghosts either. But he knew what he'd heard back there, and he knew that Captain Hook's ghost was really after him. "Oh, that's just your overactive imagination," Mom said with a weary sigh. She bent down and patted his head to calm him down. "You know how to get those bad dreams." The other parents looked over and chuckled knowingly. "My little Bobby still can't sleep without a nightlight," one father said with a smile. "He thinks monsters live under his bed." The parents all laughed in commiseration. Barry's cheeks burned. "But I swear, he's real," he protested. "It wasn't a dream. I was wide awake. He's been haunting me ever since we went to the Maritime Museum." "Sweetie, pirates aren't real," Mom said slowly, like she was talking to a little kid. "You know that. At least, not anymore." "But he is real," Barry said in an urgent voice. "It's gotta be his ghost. That's the only explanation." "Listen, I told your father it was a bad idea to take you to that pirate ship," Mom said with a weary sigh. "But we thought you were old enough to handle it." "Mom, I swear, Captain Hook's ghost is haunting me," Barry pleaded. "You have to believe me, and he's mad at me. He wants to hurt me." But she just shook her head and grabbed his hand. "Come on, sweetie, let's get you home for bed." "Wow, I'm sure glad we didn't let you go to that concert. Clearly you're not old enough for that if you can't handle a trip to the Children's Museum." Barry wanted to protest further. He wanted to argue that he wasn't seeing things, that Captain Hook's ghost was really haunting him. Maybe he could show her the hook and the note that he stole from the ship. But then he caught himself. He couldn't show those things to his mom. Then she'd know he was a thief on top of everything else. As they drove toward home, taking the familiar route by the sea, Barry started to feel even worse. His phone kept vibrating with new texts from his friends, but he switched it off. He knew they were having the best time of their lives, and he was missing it. FOMO had never felt so strong. It stung at him like needles poking at his brain. He stared out at the black waves, replaying everything from the last few days in his head. At first, not growing up had seemed so great, but it was quickly turning into a nightmare. Not getting to go to the concert was bad enough, but now Hook's ghost was after him too. How could he make it stop? They pulled up to the house, got out of the car, and were heading for the front door when Barry skidded to a halt in his tracks. "Oh no," he gasped, flinching back from the door. "Watch out!" The front door had been slashed. Deep gouges scoured the wood. Paint flecks and splinters littered the doorstep. 2 words had been hacked into the wood in jagged letters, but they were unmistakable. Scurvy brat. His mother eyed him, confused. "What's wrong?" Can't you see it?" he said, aiming one shaky finger at the message. "It's like right there." Mom squinted at the door. "Oh, this?" She bent down to scoop up a pamphlet that had been shoved into the doorframe. It was an ad for a local tree trimming service. "Just those solicitors who kept pestering us. Nothing to worry about." She crumbled up the pamphlet, slid her key into the lock, and unbolted it. Then she thrust the front door wide open and swept inside as if nothing were amiss. Why couldn't his mother see it? Barry just stared at the door in shock. The message, "Scurvy brat," stared back at him. It was clearly there, plain as day. Another terrible thought occurred to him. Was his family in danger too? What was he going to do? "Geez, you're awful jumpy today," Michael said as they walked into school on Friday morning. He shot Barry a concerned look. "What's gotten into you? I mean, you're usually a total weirdo, but this is worse than normal." Barry had dark circles under his eyes and could barely keep them open. He had tried to stay up all night for the last 2 days. Every time he fell asleep, terrible nightmares haunted him, nightmares that might have been real. Swords slashed out of the darkness at him. He'd wake up with his heart pounding, often to new gashes on the ceiling or in the headboard of his bed. Every shadow made him jump. He was growing increasingly jittery with every day that passed. Hook's ghost wasn't letting up. Barry was sure it was the captain's ghost now, even if that sounded crazy. The encounter at the Children's Museum had confirmed it. If he didn't find a way to make it stop, he was going to lose his mind. "Yeah, has Rita been even more freaky than normal?" John asked with a snort. Yeah," Barry said, distracted. Part of him wanted to tell Michael and John what was going on, but a bigger part of him feared that his friends wouldn't believe him. "My sister's a total freak and a half." He scanned the shadows in the corners of the hallway, half expecting a sword to lash out at him, or that voice to boom out. He couldn't get it out of his head. "Did you hear they're going to release the concert from the other night on streaming?" Michael said, making Barry jump. He broke into an air guitar solo, jumping to his knees. "Now you'll get to see the whole thing." "Oh, yeah?" Barry said vacantly. "Yeah, it was so lame you couldn't go," John said. "But I saw your sister making out with that loser Todd." He made a grossed-out face like he was sucking a lemon. "So at least you didn't have to witness that crime against humanity." Barry started toward their classroom, but Michael shot him a weird look. "Hey, where are you going?" he asked. "Did you forget about today?" "What do you mean?" Barry said, skidding to a halt. He could feel the Hook's weight in his backpack. He scanned his memory, but his brain felt groggy and twitchy at the same time. "It's our graduation today," John added. "We've got to head to the auditorium." "Oh, right," Barry said, smacking his forehead. "How could I forget?" "Yeah, weirdo," Michael said. "Sure you're okay? You've been acting strange lately." "Yeah, like way spacier than normal," John added, "and that's saying a lot." Barry studied his friends' faces. They looked genuinely concerned. He wanted to confide in them and confess everything. Tell them about taking the hook from the museum and making his wish to never grow up, and then how Captain Hook's ghost kept haunting him. And then he'd remembered his mother. She didn't believe him. Why would they? But he was losing his mind. He needed help. He opened his mouth to tell them, but then Michael grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the auditorium. "Come on, we can't be late for the biggest day of our lives," Michael said. "Junior high, here we come," John added with a hoot. "Lost Boys forever!" They broke out their secret handshake, and for a moment, Barry forgot about the hook and the pirate's ghost and felt better than he had in days. Maybe Hook's ghost would forget about him and leave him alone. Maybe things would start to get better. Cheered by that thought, he followed his friends into the auditorium, which was overly chilled by air conditioning and smelled like a new car. Parents were filing in through the doors, excited to capture their kids traipsing across the stage to receive their certificates. Barry scanned the crowd but didn't spot his parents. Michael and John waved to their parents, who had settled into the third row together. They waved, then chanted away like friendly neighbors, mostly because that's exactly what they were. Strange, Barry thought. Where were his parents? Not to mention his annoying aunt and cousins. Though he wouldn't mind so much if they missed the ceremony. His parents were probably rushing to get away from their work. They'd been so stressed and busy lately that they were always running late. They'd likely arrive any minute, breathless and scattered, but excited to whip out their phones and snap goofy pictures of him parading on stage with his class. Before he could worry about it further, Mr. Bates wrapped up his clipboard and ordered them to settle down. "Line up," he called out. "Alphabetical order, please." Barry dutifully assembled in his class backstage, separating from Michael and John, and slotted into the proper spot. The ceremony began with their names being called in alphabetical order, one after the next. Each kid walked across the stage to shake the principal's hand, receive their certificate, and posed for a picture. Then exited the other way. When Barry got to the front of the line, his heart hammered in anticipation. This was his first real graduation. In the fall, he would move up to junior high, and so much would change. He just hoped that he could stay best friends with Michael and John. Despite his fears about the new school, he knew that he could handle it as long as the Lost Boys stayed together. He tensed up backstage, waiting for the principal to call his name. "Wendy Derry," the principal called out. Barry's mouth dropped open. The principal skipped right over his name to the girl standing behind him. Wendy shot him a strange look, like she didn't even know him, then walked past him onto the stage. "Hey, Mr. Bates," Barry said, finding his teacher backstage. He had a gnawing feeling in his stomach. "The principal forgot to call my name. What should I do?" "What do you mean?" Mr. Bates said, looking concerned. "They skipped right to Wendy," Barry said, certain his teacher would fix it. "There must be some kind of mistake. The principal didn't call my name to graduate." Mr. Bates checked his clipboard with the class list on it, then glanced down at Barry with that glazed-over look. "Barry, darling?" Mr. Bates said with empty eyes. His voice sounded monotone. "Oh, right. You're still in 5th grade. You'll always be in 5th grade, remember?" What do you mean?" Barry stammered. His stomach sank. "My grades aren't the best, but they're okay. Grady has way worse grades and they called his name." "Special kids like you stay kids," Mr. Bates said, "and you stay in my class forever." From backstage, he heard the principal call Michael's name. His best friend marched across the stage and accepted his certificate, pausing to bow for a photo op. "No, I'm supposed to graduate with my friends," Barry said, feeling tears spring to his eyes. A lump formed in his throat. "We're all going to junior high together in the fall." "I'm sorry, but there must be a mistake," Mr. Bates said. "You can't go to junior high. That's for grown-up kids. You get to stay in 5th grade." I'm your teacher. Forever. Barry started to back away. He couldn't believe what he was hearing or what was happening to him. This was worse than the terrible nightmares and Hook's ghost haunting him. He watched as John crossed the stage, officially graduating. Still, they didn't call Barry's name. The ceremony wound to a close. His parents never arrived, either, nor did his aunt and cousins. Nobody came to see him. Barry hid backstage in the shadows by himself, while his classmates cheered and celebrated without him. Michael and John hooted and did their secret handshake, this time without Barry to share in their ritual. He felt a tear trickle down his cheek, leaving a trail. He wanted to join his friends, but he felt like a freak who didn't belong. This isn't what I meant when I made my wish, he whispered, his voice catching. But there was nobody there to hear him.